After Bitcoin has traveled nearly $20,000 off of the April lows, the first pullback seems to be occurring right in front of our very faces. Of course, I want to fit this into the overall model that we've been looking at in terms of time for price and what's kind of to be expected now in the very, very short term, like immediately, and then also relate that to what's likely to happen into the next week to 2 weeks of price action. So first things first, I do want to follow up on the meta signals setup over here. I almost said meta signals signal, which is quite redundant. But anyways, meta signals did fire off this daily long back around about 83,400 or just under 83,400, and now has effectively hit target number 1 and target number 2. Target number 1 was of course 87,250. Target number 2 is just under 95,000 bucks. We have seen on Binance, which is where this one is tested, that Binance got about what, 20 bucks away from that. Yeah, about 20 bucks away from that on yesterday's high. So I would effectively say that target number 2 has been hit. That does have a little under a 50% probability to be hit. And so generally, I'm going to be looking for a bit of a counter move after something like this is hit. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to fall apart and go all the way back down, to the lows and reverse from here. Possible, yes, but obviously that's not going to be my first sort of idea on this one. However, I want to show you a new meta signal setup, which is the 2-hour time frame. Again, 2-hour time frame going to be much different in terms of severity, in terms of power than a daily time frame. But of course, in a daily time frame, which typically can take weeks to play out, you're going to see several pullbacks along the way on lower time frames. Just for the lobotomized morons out there who do not understand this fact. Anyways, looking at the 2-hour time frame, there is a short setup. This one fired off at 93,500 bucks almost. Target number 1 is 91,400, which is just under a 70% probability to be hit. Again, that doesn't mean the same thing as 100% probability, but it is rather high, and I typically do like to bet on high probability type things. Doesn't mean they're always gonna be right though. You can see that I'm already reading the comments before even saying this. I've learned on YouTube. Anyways, target number 2, again, around about a 50% probability, is 90,650 or so. And target number 3 is just under 90,000 bucks. So we see all of these kind of around the same area, essentially, basically very, very low $90,000 territory. And I would say target number 1 has I would personally be looking for that to be hit on this first decent pullback after Bitcoin has gone up effectively $10,000 this week. I mean, and when I say this week, I really mean the past 3 days. Anyways, so from there are several other things that do support that Bitcoin is going to pull back here, at least a little bit in the short term. In yesterday's video, we identified that Bitcoin, not Bitcoin, but Tether dominance, which plays inversely of Bitcoin versus the US dollar, was bouncing off the 50% level, which is very, very common. Again, this is not a death sentence. I'm not saying that this is going to bounce back into an uptrend or anything like that. No, I do think that the downtrend is set in here, but if it does bounce, which it is bouncing, we should be expecting a pullback, and this can go on for a few bars on a 5-day time frame. So that could be, that could be like 5, 10, 15 days. Okay, maybe not that long, but you get the idea. Could easily bounce back up to like 5.25, for example, and that would put a little bit of pressure to the downside on Bitcoin spot. Maybe that puts it around that low $90,000 territory. I think that would be rather reasonable to expect. On top of that, we can go ahead and look at Bitcoin. And Bitcoin also hit its own major fib here too, if we draw a Fibonacci retracement from the high to the low of this current corrective phase thus far. And you can see that the 618 was essentially tagged on yesterday's high. That was mid $94,000 territory. So pretty much to the exact fucking decimal right there. And so, yeah, very common to be expecting a pullback around major regions like this. Again, higher term time frame targets have been met, like you see over here on the meta signal setup. The Tether dominance chart is getting its own bounce, and this one is finding a major fib to kind of play off of. So again, this is not a death sentence or anything like this. No, like the market does not move just all in one direction, all the time. But very likely good for a decent pullback here, of which we've already gotten a decent pullback. To be fair, I mean, it's already come down more than $2,000 or about $2,500 from yesterday's high. So to me, that is a good signal that this thing is in a bit of a corrective phase for the current short-term rally. And on top of this, if we go over to our momentum chart, we can see on the daily time frame, daily stochastic momentum is one in a very, very, very high position, a position that you just do not see very often. I mean, the last time we saw it anywhere near this area was back here in November on that mega rally that Bitcoin legged up from, 70 all the way to 80 in a few days. And now it is there once again. So anytime that you get momentum into these regions, it is actually a bullish thing, but in the short term, it's going to be difficult to keep up that momentum. Thus, you typically get counter plays. And this one will effectively turn down by tonight's closure, assuming Bitcoin does remain below 92,900. I mean, it's a long day left to go. Obviously, Bitcoin could very easily reclaim that before end of day. But assuming that Bitcoin closes below there, that would be the next sort of piece of information. That would be the next information that I'd be looking for to confirm that, hey, Bitcoin is going to enter into a consolidation period on this current move. Again, we just saw effectively $20,000 off the lows and $10,000 to the upside in the past, 2-3 days. Like, this is not like a crazy thing to be talking about, or at least in my opinion. So that begs the question: where is the likely target for this one? And of course, we already have our meta signal set up over here. Target number 1, I think, very likely gets hit. Target number 2, probably as well. Target number 3 at $90,000 even. It'd probably be a good area to test, to be honest, just because, it's a nice psychological number. It's a round, not even number, but round and odd number that people love. And, somewhere around there would be fine. And you can also imagine that the 200 simple on the daily time frame, this white moving average right here, is going to be around about $90,000 relatively soon. I would imagine within a week-ish. About a week, maybe a little bit more than that. So perhaps those two things correlate with each other. On top of that, I do want to draw something a little bit more experimental here, but I've been playing around with this a lot now, and it's been working really, really well, to be honest. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the 4-hour time frame price action pivot here. So that is this low at 86,400, the last major low before this last explosion on price action. And if we measure from that low, taking a bullish Fibonacci retracement to the high of this rally, that gives us about the same areas of interest for a pullback here. 382 is at 91.4. 50% level is 90,400, and 618 is 89,500 essentially. So, all of these numbers seem to have some validity. I'd be expecting some sort of an attempt at a higher low at one of these. I would say at least this one gets hit. Probably this one gets hit as well, to be honest. But getting below there is a little bit less probabilistic, I would say. Anyways, just referencing my notes really quickly here. Yes. Okay. So how does this fit into the grand scheme of things? Well, in the short term, yeah, that would imply a bit of a short-term pullback. I would still be looking for a higher low first. For Bitcoin, which would obviously set it into a position to move upwards and onwards, perhaps later on, maybe within the next 10 days or so. But in the very short term, yeah, this is a bit of a short term correction. Does this change anything as far as the higher term time frame signals? No, not really. But you can see that we are going to play out a bit of a consolidation here. And I do want to entertain the possibility of what if it does fail? So what if the lower term timeframes do fail and you see Bitcoin below $90,000 again? Well, if you see something like that, then I do think we're going to get ultimately a much more bullish scenario long term, although people will probably hate this, but that's usually a good thing, to be honest. But what I really be looking at that as, if you see Bitcoin back down below about, again, $90,000 on a daily closing basis at minimum, is that we'd essentially have a range play out here. We'd essentially have a range to be played out. Let me actually do this right for the 12-hour time frame, and we'll get rid of our indicators here as well for the moment. But I'd effectively be looking for a range play out where Bitcoin, fills out this space between 95 to the upside versus about just under $80,000 to the downside for the next month or two. That would look really, really constructive to me. Like, let's say if something like this happened, it comes down, it tries to bounce, the bounce fails, and then it really comes down below 90 and you start to see closures below there. And then you get something like this, perhaps, spend some time going sideways, and then perhaps, around June-ish, mid-June, we see an actual attempt to the upside. If we actually see something like this is going to make me a lot more bullish long-term. Whereas if Bitcoin were to just, bust its way on through and do some fucking busting action above 95, 125, I would say that this rally, certainly has a limited lifespan. I'll put it that way. This would massively elongate it for me, potentially, allowing for, decently higher price or at least a decently higher high. I would still estimate somewhere around 120 to 125 or so, on the higher end. So yeah, anyways, that is pretty much it for the regular portion of the analysis. I do want to bring you over here to the quantum wave bands to see if we've seen any more trades. This one did actually take a trade, it looks like, recently. This was late on Wednesday. This one opening at 92,900. Did have a chance to be in profit here, but I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm wrong with this shit all the time in guessing which ones are going to work out versus which ones aren't going to work out. But this one looks to me like it's probably going to be one of the ones that's might be a better idea to cut the loser a little bit earlier. But hey, at the end of the day, if you're playing statistics, you got to play statistics. We haven't really seen a loss on this strategy for 1, 2, 3. Okay, we did see a small loss right here. Yeah, so we had 3 winning trades, 1 loser. Before that, win, loss. Okay, a couple wins and a loss. And then before that, 3 wins. Yeah, so, looking at the strategy tester, which I want to put on just this, it does have a win rate of just over 71%. I think that this one's probably going to be bringing that percentage down. That's just my personal opinion, though. Of course, you can try this indicator, this strategy for free for 30 days with the code TRIAL in all capitals. All you need to do is just go into the teachable link in the description below. This one's certainly a lot more geared towards beginners, as is the price action pivots indicator, which I've actually been testing it as a scalping tool recently, which has been super effective, actually. Didn't expect it to necessarily work exactly like that. But anyways, you can use that same code on the Quant Prime service. That's certainly for a much more experienced people. If you're new, don't get that. Don't do it. Like, you're gonna have more questions than you reasonably want to have. But the quantum wave band's a lot more geared towards beginners. Gives you an idea of what an actual strategy looks like. Most importantly, it puts the training wheels on to stop you from getting fucking wrecked, telling you when is a good time to consider an entry, when is a good time to consider an exit. And again, very, very short-term time frame scalping. We are going to be raising the price on this one at the end of this month, starting May 1st. It of course will come with added value, that being more trending strategies and also, of course, the Discord and the AI chatbot, both of which actually are available to users right now. All right, cool. That's enough shilling for one day. Hopefully that was in some way helpful. And as always, I'd like to wish you the best of best. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully tomorrow.